This week's crypto recap. Bitcoin soars to $40,000 for the first time in 20 months after excitement over a Bitcoin ETF approval builds in the market and a large investor adds to their Bitcoin stack. We discuss all of this and more in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes. As always, I'll kick things off with just a bit of a market temp check, and then we'll get into breaking down all of the news that you need to know about and recent trends in the industry with Nick here as well. So getting into the market, and as I said, Bitcoin is up to 40,000 for the past 7 days. It is up 7%, with all of the major altcoins also sort of rising as well. So Ethereum finally broke through, saw that 2100 barrier that had been sort of its ceiling for most of this year, is now up to 2200. And even some strength continued in Solana as well, which is now up 10% for the week, up to 63. So really finishing off really Q4 very strongly after a very strong November. And this is sort of carried through to the start of December. Just a few comments on what's sort of driving this. We continue to see large institutional inflows into the market. So we've been commenting quite a bit on CoinShares weekly report that just takes all of the investment products that are listed all around the world on different exchanges. And they sort of just track the net inflows into those products versus the outflows. And this is actually the fourth week of net inflows, which is, again, a very strong signal that institutions are, getting more exposure to cryptocurrencies overall. It's worth noting that about 90% of those inflows are to do with Bitcoin-related investment products, and about, maybe 10% or so is about ETH. So anything other than BTC and ETH, they're not really focused on too much at this stage, which is sort of typical of those more conservative institutions. Finally, here we've been talking about open interest in the major sort of trading venues or the futures venues, with CME, the world's largest sort of futures venue out there for any commodity or any futures product. It has actually now claimed #1 spot for, I suppose, the overall open interest in any sort of crypto futures exchange, which again is a reflection of institutions just getting more active in the space, which I think is having a big effect in driving prices higher, as well as some other things that we'll get into today. But Nick, I'll hand it over to you to kick things off with a Binance update and what's been going on over there.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Great to be back for another week. Yeah, this one we spoke about a lot last week in the pod regarding the historic Binance settlement with the CFTC and the Department of Justice. But a major theme we noted, especially in our newsletter, was that the SEC was absent from that, which was a really big storyline that was potentially missed. And we saw some reports come out, I think from the Wall Street Journal or a few other mainstream publications, sort of talking about Binance's US arm, Binance US, and potentially that the SEC is still investigating them for FTX-like fraud. So this was, a really big grey cloud that was overhanging the market, questioning whether Binance and FTX, were similar in that regard. So although we had the settlement, early signs of that it's not totally over in the market, and the SEC is still sort of poking around at Binance. So I'm getting the feeling we may see potentially something else come out of Binance, or hopefully, to start off next year, we can get a rest to all this, and potentially the SEC, will sort of stand down and just let Binance US exit the market. So a small storyline that's still going on that is important to pay attention to.
Yeah, of course, the SEC with those active cases against Kraken as well as Coinbase. So, 3 of the largest exchanges out there with active cases. So it'll be interesting to see how those go heading into 2024 and what comes of that. But moving on to, I suppose, what really drove the markets last week was just increased speculation or confidence in the market that an ETF, a long-awaited ETF for Bitcoin, a spot Bitcoin ETF in the US will be approved. So again, like we've been saying, nothing is guaranteed yet, but the market seems to be getting more confident. Why is that the case? Well, the latest sign last week was really just the SEC being very prompt in letting through these new filings from certain applicants, where that was important because really these particular applicants are going in for a comment period where the SEC takes in comments from the public and then considers them. That final deadline of those comments is is just before where that January sort of 10th date that the market has long sort of expected or increased their chances of sort of saying, hey, that's the date where we think the SEC is going to approve an ETF. So the SEC doing that was another sort of, I think, catalyst last week that drove prices higher. Because again, the market is sort of expecting that if the SEC does approve a Bitcoin spot ETF, it will approve them all at once. So that's why getting those, I think, 2 sort of applicants in just before that cutoff time was again another signal that the SEC is starting to get everything in order, so it can then come out, January 8th, or I think it was like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, one of those days, and be ready to sort of approve all of the applicants at once. So this was from the Bloomberg ETF analysts that, they did say Monday, January 8th, Tuesday, January 9th, or Wednesday, January 10th would be the dates they are marking in their calendars for, an announcement and likely an approval by the SEC. But nothing is certain in these markets, but I think that's what has been driving them higher, I think, definitely in the past, 5-6 days or so.
Also, we're gonna have to have a party going on, I reckon, around that time. I'll be curious to know your thoughts. What if you had to make a decision now, Matt, over or under those dates? What is your sort of gut feeling?
Oh, like longer or shorter? I think it happens. Yeah, I think it happens, and they do approve it like on one of those 3 days, January 8th, 9th, or 10th. Yeah. What about you?
Maybe I might throw a needle in the haystack and say they may continue delaying just to go against the crowd.
Yeah, nice. No, it's always good to be thinking of things that could actually drive down, because as we've been saying, the market's put all chips in on this happening. So indeed, if there was a denial of all of them at the same time, I would be sure Bitcoin would kind of nuke in price, and all the crypto market would, because the market has sort of in certain periods this year, I think, got ahead of its skis in sort of expecting this to happen. Turns out it's very probable at this stage, which is great. But yeah, we'll see what happens in early January. But moving on to, well, I suppose another reason maybe why Bitcoin has been going up in the last weeks, because someone in particular, or a company, very well-known company within the Bitcoin community, has been accumulating quite a few BTC in the past few weeks. So what's this one, Nick?
This one's our good friend Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, who are only continuing to buy Bitcoin, especially in the latest run-up. So they come out and said that they bought about 16,000 Bitcoins for about, almost $600 million. It was actually their biggest purchase in the last 2 years, and it brings their holdings to about 170,000 Bitcoins. Which is, I'm not sure how much of the total supply that is, but surely it's getting up there, and 1+%, or a bit under that. So they, just continuing to still pursue their Bitcoin standard, framework, which essentially is that they're, issuing more company stock, or potentially issuing more company stock too, that they're talking about, and then using that to buy Bitcoin. They've talked about they're going to potentially issue some more stock to continue this purchasing. But essentially, whenever they have like excess cash, they're just using that to buy Bitcoin. And they've got a lot of, Bitcoin loans that they've denominated in the last couple of years. And it looks like they're just continuing to go strong. I saw the average price is about $36,000 per Bitcoin, which I think, looking at it now and thinking where Bitcoin's going to go, it sounds like Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy look like that is actually a pretty good or interesting purchase price, where we might see where it's going. I know they were kind of ridiculed a bit because they were talking about buying the top of Bitcoin, back in April 2021. So really interesting to see the biggest purchases in 2 years, and they're only going to continue potentially issue more stock and more debt, and just keep buying Bitcoin in this uncertain time we have.
Yeah, for so long they were, at an unrealized loss or underwater, the MicroStrategy position in Bitcoin. And yeah, you're right. They've always had that long-term outlook, and I suppose that's been vindicated, at least for now, now that they're in that sort of unrealized gain territory. And yeah, that projected, raising an extra $750 million when, as you said, Nick, that purchase of this most recent purchase of nearly $600 million was their biggest in over 2 years. So when you're talking about raising another $750 million, that is, I think again, another reason why the market, went higher, almost anticipating, well, if they're going to do this, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin now because, well, they're going to have to buy even more. So I think, again, another reason why prices have been going up. But yeah, they just continue to buy, which is, always surprises me. But, they've definitely got the confidence, that's for sure. We'll move on here to a interesting story about, to do with Uniswap and almost the institutionalization of the space we often talk about in terms of, Bitcoin trading or just exposure to Bitcoin. But this one actually had to do with the world of decentralized finance, or DeFi, with Uniswap here. So the news here is Talos, it's sort of an institutional crypto trading platform. They are now opening up routing of trades through Uniswap. So this is a big development, because normally they will only route their trades through centralized exchanges, which are actual companies that are, registered in a certain jurisdiction. This is a big development, I think, particularly at a time when so much uncertainty about DeFi, where Talos here is showing, I suppose, enough confidence, or taking the risk in a way where they think it's a valid risk to take in terms of getting more deeply integrated with DeFi at a time when, as we'll talk about a bit later, certain authorities and bodies in the US that are still sort of, projecting and positioning themselves as very hostile to DeFi. So that was one sort of takeaway from me, and probably a second of two takeaways here is really just a big opportunity for an entity like Uniswap, and then maybe even other similar sort of, liquidity, protocols out there and DEXs out there, if you could have sort of institutions sort of plugging in directly to your exchanges. So Uniswap almost would be, the first off the bat here, and we'll see if there's actual sort of adoption and more volumes going through Uniswap, and that would sort of be indicative of the fact that Talos's institutional clients are actually, using this and tapping into what is often pretty good liquidity on the likes of Uniswap, even compared to some of those centralized exchanges out there. So yeah, really good development to see at a time of uncertainty for DeFi. And then we'll head over to Unic on this one. Remember ICOs, that old acronym? Initial coin offerings back in the day. There's a potential they might be making a return, Nick. What have you got to say here?
This is a really interesting story that I saw that was posted by CoinDesk last week. Especially in our own conversations, we were talking about ICOs, and so this came at a really interesting time. So the Hong Kong Securities Trade Group essentially just proposed to offer an initial coin offering, that ICO portal, so that any crypto group, any group of people who want to create a coin offering can do it in a sort of legal capacity and allow people to access these ICOs again. Now, ICOs were really out of favor in the last couple of years because we saw them in the run-up of 2017, all gained steam, but it turned out there just was a lot of ICOs. There were a lot of fluff, a lot of nefarious actors raising a lot of capital without actually delivering anything to, investors. And this caused a lot of, regulatory pushback with, them being banned back in China, then being, really cut off in the US, and a lot of big ICOs were starting to get, prosecuted. Now, this is a really interesting idea because ICOs were actually one of crypto's real first killer use case, I think. We talk a lot about stablecoins, but we actually talk about crowdfunding as one of the best uses of cryptocurrency on blockchain, because it can just gather capital so efficiently throughout the world for a common idea and project. Now, this took a wrong route where we had too many nefarious actors that were, raising capital without anything, really just looking to take money and not really achieve anything with it. So I'm really interested to see whether we see more regulation in the space, whether we're going to see continued move of things like this, potential trade groups or, regulators starting to look into creating a legal framework for these ICOs, which I think would unlock a lot more projects to come up. If we think about 2017, we saw a lot of ICOs. I could only imagine how many more projects will launch once they feel comfortable in the regulatory environment to launch. And if we see actual portals like this that can guarantee and protect, I guess, investors from some of these ICOs. So a really cool movement. And I wonder if we're going to see this as a theme heading into next year.
Yeah, for sure. If there is a condition where liquidity is increasing, which it has been recently, like global liquidity, and there's just more appetite to, invest in even riskier things such as these, fundraising vehicles, then yeah, this would be great timing for the likes of Hong Kong to really attract, even more, crypto activity, and almost be a leader in this potential rebirth of ICOs. So yeah, definitely one to keep an eye out for sure. Heading on to one that actually did launch via a token launchpad back in the day, or at least part of its percentage. That's a Solana. A very small amount from memory went to the public sale. Their biggest staker, Jito, is launching a token. So they are in fact the largest staker on the Solana network. And they are also then known for their sort of liquid staking as well. So they've been around for quite a while, and I know Nick's done quite a bit of content on Jito over the years, and they're sort of coming out at a time with this token, at a time when Solana's been gaining a lot of traction. We've talked ad nauseum about, in the last 12 months about how Solana is still alive and it's not dead yet, and that's even proved to be the case heading in at December 2023, where, Solana is really having a strong finish to the year, and the likes of Jito coming out with a token. We saw Pith Network recently announce a token and actually launch it. That is now live. And even Jupiter was another one that recently announced a token, and that is getting very close to launching. So just on that Jupiter one, which is one of the oldest sort of DeFi aggregators, DEXs on Solana, they actually opened the Airdrops sort of website, or the claims, or the Airdrops portal in the past few days, where, you can go and check if you are eligible for the Jupiter airdrop. And again, it will be another sort of injection once that token does launch, an injection of sort of capital, if you think about it in that way, in the Solana ecosystem itself, where people will be getting, free money. To very oversimplify it, not really a fair term, but free money, an injection of capital that they might reinvest into the Solana ecosystem. We saw this at a massive scale with Ethereum, a few years ago, with a lot of airdrops back then. But we'll drop a link to the Jupiter airdrop page in the comments, in the podcast or description below. As we said with the Pith Network airdrop a couple of weeks ago, be very careful of scams. They are particularly ripe this time around times of airdrops, because they're often the most common way that people do lose all of their crypto potentially if they fall victim to a scam or a phishing link in terms of a fake airdrop. So just be very careful about links, anything to do with airdrops. But if you are eligible for them, it's a very, very exciting time.
If you use Solana, I definitely recommend having a look, because even if you use something like Phantom, a wallet, and you did a trade in Phantom, you would actually be eligible for the Jupiter airdrop, because they route a lot of their transactions through this exchange. So you may even get an airdrop without knowing that you actually used the protocol, which is a really interesting concept.
Yeah, for sure. That is a very common thing with these airdrops. A lot of time they will, that in particular is specific to Jupiter, where it is an aggregator. But even I remember the Celestia one, the other month, they were rewarding even activity on Ethereum L2s and things like that, where you might not immediately think that you're connected to that project, but indirectly they can still reward certain sections or certain activities or behaviors. So always, that's a great point, Nick, to always consider that, and just try checking on these airdrop websites if you are eligible, because you might be surprised that you are sometimes. Gaming is one we'll quickly cover here, Nick, because crypto is rallying, yes, but I think a strong outperformer to end this year has definitely been just gaming tokens in general. I know you've done a lot of work at the Collective Shift member platform of just breaking down, all the ways you can get exposure to gaming and how sort of big the category is these days. Can you maybe just explain, why is gaming having such a strong end to 2023?
As you mentioned, we just saw like token prices accelerate. A few of these gaming tokens, 100%, 200% in the last 30 days. So obviously a narrative here. And from what I'm seeing, it's some of these big games that have been launching or creating for the last couple of years in amongst the bear market are finally releasing their products to the market. This is the case with Illuvium, who finally went live on the Epic Games Store with one of their initial games, which is open access. So this was a really big move, and I think really helped a lot of the gaming narrative kick off, and it really attracted to platforms like Immutable X, who are partnering with Illuvium, and they get a very small slither of the success of Illuvium because they're used as the platform, and they do get a sort of a revenue share from Illuvium, especially the core team. So we're seeing other cryptocurrencies that really increased along the lines of Ronin, which was one of the biggest gaming change, which was home to Axie Infinity, but they're actually not just for Axie. They've got a plethora of other games that are starting to launch, and a few which actually gained a lot of traction with I think 100,000 daily active users on some of these. So really keen to see if this will continue into 2024, because we know that gaming is such a big narrative, and we're only going to see more of these AAA games and actual high quality crypto native games start to hit the market, because they just spent so long building, and we're finally starting to see what could happen once they start to launch, and even more so once they become potentially fun to play and retain a lot of crypto users, and then get a lot of non-crypto users into the ecosystem. Because that was always the big, I guess, bull case for crypto gaming, is that it's a really good use case for NFTs and these crypto incentives, but also just to attract people who may not be crypto natives, but just like the games to play. They might not realize that they're accumulating sort of a bunch of NFTs that they can sell later, or can convert that to ETH, for example. So a lot to like, and we just covered it in our latest newsletter. So anyone that's excited for the crypto gaming narrative, always encourage you to check out our newsletter, because we do continue write-ups on a lot of the topical stuff that happens in the space.
Yeah, well said, Nick. I think these big, highly anticipated games that are about to launch or have recently just launched, like Illuvium, like Shrapnel, just about to go. I think Star Atlas is coming up, which the Solana founder even said last week was just so critical for the Solana ecosystem. I think I agree with that these highly anticipated games, the pressure's on them in a way, because I think if they don't deliver, and they're so well capitalized compared to a lot of the other gaming startups, if they don't deliver, I think that would be quite bearish for the overall gaming space. But as you said, vice versa, if the opposite's true, really, if one of them is a breakout performer, I could definitely see a lot more excitement going around gaming. So I think that's why late in 2023, there is a lot of momentum and just interest in this, because everyone's watching, I feel like, to see how these perform. So yeah, really, really exciting point for gaming.
It's also the traditional game developers that are really paying attention to this. We talked about 60% of crypto funding in the last 2022 went to crypto gaming and blockchain gaming, but these big companies like CCP Games, which creates EVE Online, Ubisoft, which creates Assassin's Creed, Zynga, which is a mobile gaming behemoth, Square Enix, which is the creator of Final Fantasy, they're all launching and creating and testing crypto gaming and blockchain gaming. So it's these big companies that are paying attention, and that's a core reason which caught my eye, and is why I'm following this narrative so closely. And I think if these big developers start to drop off and cancel all of their games, then that'd be another signal that perhaps the crypto gaming narrative was not what it was put up to be, or was just maybe not a great use of crypto.
Yeah, no, very well said. Definitely we'll be watching that closely heading into next year. Just quickly, did you want to touch on what's going on with the US Treasury, sort of sending a letter to Congress in recent days?
Yeah, this is something that I'm looking forward to in the next couple of months, and then again, into next year, because this was a quite powerful letter reported by CoinDesk. So it's this idea of the United States Department of Treasury. They sent this letter to Congress, which proposes that they maybe have to have some sort of legislative change to deal with a lot of this crypto, terrorist financing. We talked about in previous podcast episodes about, this potential false narrative of how much money is used in the illicit finance area or by terrorist organizations. But we saw, Treasury is not, letting go of this, and they're doubling down and looking to pressure Congress to have, more power over crypto and over USD denominated stablecoins. So there was just a few soft proposals which just suggested that a lot of these crypto companies would have to be more stringent in a lot of their reporting in the way that they retain information and the way that they deal with a lot of different actors in the space. So this is far from anything that's being created into law or change, but it is a signal that potentially the US Treasury could double down on some harsh legislation, which is always probably the bearish case for some of these crypto platforms if they're going to have to abide by seriously constricting laws that potentially even unsure in how that's actually enforced and how they do it. So this is going to hopefully see a lot of pushback next year from a lot of crypto advocacy organizations, but just a small thing to end the year, and potentially try to increase Treasury's power over how they deal with cryptocurrency and this crypto, illicit financing.
Yeah, definitely a watch this space. I do remember December this time, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, back then the treasurer was Steve Mnuchin, and he was really pushing for around that Christmas period, was really getting aggressive after crypto, and the advocacy bodies there were able to fend it off and stop whatever he was trying to do from happening. But yet here we are 3 years later, where essentially the same things sort of happening, where different backgrounds, different not conflict of interest, but incentives, towing the party line, etc., is still very much present in the US and will have a very strong impact, I think. And I know Nick agrees with this on the long-term outlook of the space in general. So yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on, and we'll keep you covered heading into next year. But ending off, Nick, with our rapid fire, as we always do, something that maybe the market did not really pick up on last week, or something that people were focusing on that we think really was out overblown and just got way too much traction. I'll kick things off with Polygon this week. We're heading into December, often a very quiet period in just terms of just news flow and just project updates. But this did catch my eye, which I haven't seen too many people talk about because everyone's been celebrating the price growth. But Polygon has actually got 3 important dates here that Sandeep, the founder, sort of shared last week. 7th of December, Polygon Connect, which is a big sort of blockchain sort of event in India, where sort of the team that founded Polygon is from. 14th of December, they said Polygon will be sharing a public demo of their zero knowledge product, which again has got a lot of sort of anticipation around it. He believes it should be an important milestone for the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And then finally, the 20th of December, he says that Polygon will be changing the game for real-world assets and institutional adoption. So he's talking a big game there, I will admit, but I'm really keen to see just what indeed those announcements are, particularly on the 14th of December and the 20th. So yeah, watch this space with Polygon. We might drop a link to that tweet as well for anyone interested in the show notes.
Yeah, interesting to want to pay attention to Polygon. Definitely, it's good, always on our list for 2024. Probably my underappreciated was the crypto fundraising stage at the moment. We covered this a lot in looking at just the downward trend of fundraising, which is a really good signal of the crypto ecosystem and fundamentals, and looking at liquidity and whether money's flowing into the space, and which projects are being invested in. We saw that there was $1 billion invested in and raised in the cryptocurrency space in the last month. This hit 6-month highs. So I was just really looking forward to this, because maybe this is start to end the bottom of that crypto downtrend, which we saw some highs, but we always saw lower lows in fundraising raised. So I'm going to look at this 1 billion figure to see if next month we continue the momentum, and potentially we could start to see a reversal of that trend, which was really down only. And I think we hit a bottom of 500 million, which was invested in August 2023. So crypto fundraising, always a really good indicator to watch, although it is a lagging one, because it does take a while for a lot of these deals to be settled. And it takes really more than 6 months for some of these ones to be announced, upwards to a year. So really, really keen. I'm not sure your thoughts, Matt, if we think crypto fundraising has totally bottomed, but we can definitely see the liquidity environment potentially may increase, especially if we see lower rates into next year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Nick. I think it has bottomed, and it will take a while, I think, to get back to anything resembling, 2 years ago or whatever, where the valuations were pretty ridiculous. But yeah, it's encouraging to see actual strong fundamental projects being funded and gain the capital they need to sort of go to the next level. So always important to see, as well as it's a good way to see what trends are coming up, as you said, Nick, as well, to discover new projects. But we will leave it there for this week. So that is a wrap. If you are looking for more insights, do see our revamped weekly shift newsletter, providing free weekly market insights every Friday. Subscribe at collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.